Hello, this is Dr. Martell, and this lecture will be on Augustine. I'll be providing some background on him and then getting into book one of his On Free Choice of the Will. I want to begin, though, by making a correction to something that I said in the lecture on Plotinus. I said that Plotinus, as a relatively young man, had joined a Roman expedition led by the Roman emperor against people who were, for all intents and purposes, the Persians. And I said that expedition had been a disaster. The Roman emperor was killed. Plotinus was lucky to escape with his own life. He did not meet those sages of the East whom he had hoped to meet, and instead he settled in Rome and began to teach there. That's all right. That's all accurate. I mistakenly said that the Roman emperor in question had been captured by the Persians, enslaved for a time, made to do many humiliating things, and then had been executed by the Persians. That's not so. The Roman emperor who led the expedition, of which Plotinus was a part, was Gordian III. And Gordian III did indeed die during the course of that expedition. He was killed, although it's not clear who killed him. The Persians, I believe, claimed to have done it. but there's some reason to believe that actually his own troops, the expedition was going so poorly, his own troops might have killed him. He was not then captured by the Persians, enslaved, and then at some later date executed. No. That actually happened to another subsequent Roman emperor, a man named Valerius. He too led an expedition against the Persians. It was again a disaster. He was captured, enslaved, and executed in what I gather was a rather cruel fashion. So apologies for that error. I do sometimes get my 3rd century Common Era Roman emperors confused. Hard to imagine why, given these figures are clearly so very different from each other. Augustine is a 4th and 5th century Common Era figure. He's born in 354 in the Common Era, and he's born in part of the Roman Empire, the part located in what is present-day Algeria. His mother was, I guess, of local stock. So she's a local, native to the place, and she was a Christian. And I believe that she, like her son, Augustine, was later canonized. So I believe she's actually a saint of the Catholic Church, too. Augustine's father, though, was not a Christian. I believe he's what the Christians of the time would have called a pagan. He was not from the place, not from Algeria. He's an outsider, a Roman official. So he's someone who got a government job and was assigned to work in this place. And met and married a local woman. And the result of that is Augustine. While his father was a person of some status in Roman society, which is a very hierarchical society, right? It does not seem as though he was a person of very, very high status. And there are a couple of reasons for thinking this. One is that there's some evidence that Augustine's father was descended from freedmen, so people who had once been enslaved and then became free. Now, it is true that some freedmen rose to very great heights in Roman society, right? Like Epaphroditus, right? The freedman of Nero, who for a time owned Epictetus, right? But generally this did not happen. There wasn't a great deal of social mobility in Roman society, so it's a very hierarchical society, such that the rung, right, that you are born into, that is in all likelihood the rung that you're going to stay on, right? Where you're born, what rank you are when you're born, that's the rank at which you tend to stay. Freedmen were a very low rank, right? right? So it's likely that, in spite of the fact that his father was a Roman official, he was not a person of very high social status. Yes, enough to provide a decent education to his son, actually a good education for the time, but not a person of high status. So the other evidence that we have that his father was not of very high status has to do with the career that Augustine chose. He chose to become a teacher of rhetoric, and that was one of the few careers that offered the prospect of raising one's status in this very hierarchical society. And I would assume that you would raise your status basically by networking. That's what being a teacher of rhetoric provided you with an opportunity to do. After all, who would hire teachers of rhetoric? Families who could afford private tutors for their children. So these are going to be wealthy and powerful families. One can get to know these people. They can become essentially patrons, right? They can look out for you and help advance you to higher and higher ranks within Roman society. That's what Augustine did. He became a teacher of rhetoric, and it also seems that Augustine actually really loved rhetoric. In fact, as a much older man, he even sometimes writes to the effect that he then, as an older man, thinks that he loved it too much. Right? He was really passionate about it. He was especially enamored of two authors during this phase when he was very devoted to rhetoric. One was Seneca, and Seneca is, of course, one of the great Roman Stoics. He's one of the three great Roman Stoics, along with Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. So this tells us that Augustine would have been very, very familiar with Stoic views, especially their views in ethics. But his great love, as far as rhetoricians went, was Cicero, or in English, Cicero, right? The great Roman politician and orator, writer on rhetoric, but also Cicero was something of a philosopher and wrote a great deal about Greek Hellenistic philosophies. Indeed, Cicero is one of our main sources for information on some rather technical aspects of Stoicism. This in spite of the fact that Cicero himself was like a skeptic of the academic variety, right? The variety of skepticism that emerged out of the school that Plato founded, the Academy, when it took a skeptical turn. In spite of this, right, Cicero wrote very knowledgeably about many different Hellenistic philosophies, including Stoicism. Okay. Further evidence then that Augustine is someone who would have known a great deal about that philosophy in particular. Augustine was successful as a teacher of rhetoric. He was eventually able to get a job, a good one, in Milan. So he left Algeria and for a time lived in Milan. Either before he got this job in Milan or while in Milan, he also became a Manichaean. So a Manichaean, as the name suggests, is someone who believes in Manichaeism. And Manichaeism, as the name suggests, is a doctrine which derives from the teachings of one person in particular, someone named Mani. And Mani was a prophet from the East, specifically, I believe, Persia. Okay. Now, if you examine in detail, the views of the Manichaeans, what becomes clear fairly quickly is that it's a derivative of the dominant religion in the part of the world from which it emerged. It emerged right from the Persian part of the world. The dominant religion there was Zoroastrianism. So it's kind of like a twist, Manichaeism, on Zoroastrianism, right? But it's a twist that had like special appeal to Augustine actually throughout his life, even after he became a Christian. It had special appeal because it offered an elegant solution to a problem that Augustine was always very concerned with, and that's the problem of evil. So we know that the problem of evil is not a problem that suddenly like emerged with the advent of Christianity and like its growing influence. Definitely, right. The problem of evil is a problem for Christians, but it was a problem for Greeks too. We know this because we know that it was discussed by Greek philosophers. We know that the Epicureans discussed this problem, actually as part of an effort to show that the gods, if they exist, must surely be indifferent to us, right? And so not beings that we need to worry ourselves about. It's also a problem discussed by the skeptics in an effort to show that no, we don't know what the Stoics claim that we know. We don't know that there's a benevolent world soul guiding everything towards good outcomes. We don't know that. They brought up the problem of evil, right, in order to cast doubt on that notion. So it's not a new problem. Okay, Christians inherit it. It seems as though Manichaeism always appealed to Augustine, mainly because it offered an elegant solution to the problem. Now, really, in fact, there's no one problem of evil. There are actually several problems of evil. One version of the problem of evil is sometimes called the holiness problem, and that's the problem of how God can really, given that there is evil in the world, how God can be anything other than an evildoer, right? In other words, given that there is evil in the world, how is it possible that God is not somehow responsible for it? Okay, so that's what's called the holiness problem. Another version of the problem of evil is the problem of how God can possibly have all the qualities that people like to attribute to God, if there is also evil in the world, right? Like, how could God be so very powerful and know everything and be perfectly good if there's also all this evil? Surely all this evil argues for God being less than God is made out to be. Either God is ignorant of some things, and just that's why there's evil in the world, like God misses it, or God just doesn't have the power to eliminate it. God is weaker than people think God is ordinarily, or maybe God's not all that good, like interested in doing some good, right? But not so interested in the good as to will to eliminate all the evil that there is. So that's sometimes called the underachiever problem. Okay, so there are several different problems of evil, right? But they all involve an apparent incompatibility between God and the fact that there's evil in the world. Okay, Manichaeans had an elegant solution to this problem, and the solution is this. First, yes, the world is evil. This is an evil world, right? Second, yes, God created this world. And so, God is an evildoer, right? Indeed, we can go so far as to say that the God who created this world is an evil God. Okay. However, the God who created this world, according to Manichaeans, is not the only God. There's also a good God who has had nothing whatsoever to do with the creation of this world. Nothing whatsoever to do with it. Right? their view is that that other God, the good God, is going to come and destroy this evil world that the evil God has created. And that's going to be a good thing, because the good God is not only going to destroy this evil world, but is also going to save the few good beings of soul, so embodied souls that exist in this world, right? So Manichaeans believed that the good God was a savior God who would, they hoped, save them. This was actually apparently a popular movement, Manichaeism, among at least some Roman elites, because it seems that during this period when Augustine was one of them, like a Manichaean, his fellow Manichaeans helped advance his career. so he not only, right, like used connections to like wealthy and powerful Roman families for whom he was teaching to sort of move up in Roman society. He also used I guess you could call them like religious connections to advance himself. But eventually he had a falling out with these people, and I think, as he tells it, the falling out had to do with astronomy. And I should use the word astronomy here with some caution, because it was probably a mixture of what nowadays we would recognize as astronomy, but also something like astrology too. Augustine apparently was troubled by the claims that his fellow Manichaeans were making about the heavenly bodies, the principles by which they worked, what the significance of celestial happenings was. My impression is that he became fed up with them because he thought that what they were saying was baseless, like the available evidence simply did not support, right, the views that they were expressing, and so he broke with them, and for a time he became a skeptic. And so here's someone who is like very familiar, right, with Stoic views. Also, for a time, he was not just like familiar with another Hellenistic philosophy, skepticism. Like, he was himself a skeptic, and you can see evidence of this in some other writings of Augustine. Particularly, I believe a dialogue, I think, called the Teacher, and another dialogue called Against the Academicians. Right? Academicians were skeptics. Okay. Oh, and that indicates that Augustine eventually broke from skepticism too. He was a skeptic for a much briefer period of time than he was a Manichaean. He broke from skepticism by converting to like what amounts to Catholicism, like the dominant form of Christianity, like in his part of the world at that time. I believe his conversion takes place in 387 or 386, around about there. He then advances, almost as you would expect at this point, given that it's Augustine. He then advances like very, very, very quickly within the church hierarchy, and I think in 395 in the Common Era, he becomes bishop. So within the space of 8 years, right, he goes from being like not a Christian to being bishop. He becomes Bishop of Hippo, which I believe was located back in his home region, so North Africa. Okay. Our text is written from a fairly earlier period in Augustine's life as a Christian, on free choice of the will. I think this text comes mainly like from the 390s. Augustine, though, was a prolific writer, and several of his works that were written later, so after On Free Choice of the Will, are kind of like, they're sort of like landmark works in the history of what would become known as Western thought. And one of those works is called like City of God, in which Augustine defends the faith against the charge of some pagans that Christianity was ruining the empire. And then probably like one of the main inspirations in Western thought for like all autobiography, there's another major work by Augustine. It's called The Confessions. Towards the end of his life too, he devoted a lot of his energies as a writer, but apparently also as a politician, to combating a movement within Christianity called, I believe, Pelagianism. And this is a movement that was based upon the thought of a monk, I believe, named Pelagius. And what Augustine took issue with is something in Pelagius's thought that has been called moral perfectionism. So moral perfectionism is basically the view that it is within the power of human beings themselves to do good and to become good people. Like, we can do that. That's within our power. You would think that this would not be like a controversial claim to make. After all, I mean, we're all supposed to be good, and I mean, like, surely all Christians would agree to that claim. This is how we ought to be, right? We ought to do good things. We ought to be good people. Ought implies can, doesn't it? I mean, to say that someone ought to do something would seem to imply that they have the ability to do it. And so if you think that people ought to be good, right, surely you think it's within their power to do so, right? No, like Augustine disagreed. Okay. So this indicates a difference, actually, between Augustine's views and the views of someone like not just Pelagius, but also the views of someone like Plotinus. Right? In the next lecture on Augustine, when I talk about more Book 2 and Book 3, we'll see there more evidence of the profound influence that Plotinus had on Augustine. Okay? One of the things I failed to note in my discussion of Augustine's life is that, right, actually, like just prior to his conversion to Christianity, Augustine encountered, apparently for the first time, some Neoplatonist writing. Like, we don't know which books he read, but he read some of the people, or at least one of the people, who's now classified as a Neoplatonist. So he encountered Plotinus's views, either directly or indirectly by one of Plotinus's followers. This had a profound impact on him, and it seems to have partly, anyway, like, motivated him to convert to Christianity. So Augustine is very powerfully influenced by Plotinus, but there are points of difference, and this is one of them. Okay? As I explained in the lecture on Plotinus, a lot of Plotinus's thought can be understood by way of that famous allegory from the Republic called the allegory of the cave. Right? I mean, Plotinus recommends for human beings a process of ascent. Right? That process is allegorized, right, by that story about the cave. Like, what we should do, speaking allegorically as human beings, is turn away from the shadows, right? Physical things, bodies, right? Turn towards, right, the sources of light, right, which are going to be heavenly bodies, especially the sun. Okay? That's the way to go, right? Thing is, in Plotinus, it looks as though this is something that is like fully within our power to do. It's not actually clear how the second and highest ascent is to be accomplished. This is not a cognitive achievement. but Plotinus did seem to think that this was something that was in our power to do. Right? We didn't need an assist from someone or something else to do this. That's not Augustine's view, right? Augustine, like Plotinus, right, thinks that we should, again, speaking allegorically, turn away from the shadows, right? So, we should, in a sense, turn away from the physical world. We should turn towards, right, the light source, right? You can imagine what the light source is for Augustine as a Christian, right? It's God, okay? We should engage in ascent, as Plotinus understood this. Okay? However, Augustine's view will be that this is not entirely within human power. We have to try to get there, right? But our efforts alone are, in his view, not enough. Human nature, he will argue, has become so corrupt that the only way for us to finally ascend and emerge from the cave, still speaking allegorically, is with the assistance of God. Okay, and so that's why he disagreed vehemently with Pelagius and followers of Pelagius, like the Pelagians, and he actually tried to have that whole movement more or less outlawed, and through his political efforts, he actually managed to get many of these people exiled, to unintentionally on his part, but they ended up settling in the Eastern Roman Empire, which became the Byzantine Empire. This is Augustine's doing, right? So this was it was practically a crusade that he was undertaking against the Pelagians. So this is a difference between him and the Pelagians, and it's also a difference between him and Plotinus, right? A divine assist is necessary in order for humans to finally ascend. We don't have what it takes anymore to be good, just by on the basis of our own power. Okay. Furthermore, Augustine also believed that while you have to try to ascend, right, in order to be able to do so, he also believed that God did not dispense assistance. God did not, in other words, give help to people trying to ascend on the basis of merit. So Augustine's view is not the people who try the hardest, right? They're going to get the most help. No, that's not the case. His view was that God is actually in no way constrained to help those who do the most to help themselves. Okay. Now, why Augustine thought this is actually it's rather complicated, but it seems to have to do in part with his view that God is omnipotent, that God is all powerful, right? And this is a point worth dwelling upon for a moment. So bear with me here. Greek gods were not all powerful. They were very, very powerful, but no Greek god was all powerful like the Christian God is supposed to be all powerful. This includes Aristotle's unmoved mover, and it even includes the world soul of the myth of the Timaeus, or the world soul called Zeus that the Stoics believed in. If Plotinus is one, if that fundamental hypostasis is God, Plotinus certainly talks about it that way. Plotinus' God is the one, is not all powerful. At least on my understanding of Plotinus, and that's because neither Plotinus is God, nor the God of the Stoics, nor Aristotle's God, nor nor the gods of just ordinary Greeks and Romans. None of these create from nothing. But the Christian God does that. Okay? The Christian God creates, using a bit of Latin, ex nihilo, creates from nothing. So the Christian God is not just a God who, like the demiurge in the myth of Timaeus, shapes matter. That God just finds on hand. Shapes matter so that it is an image of the forms, so that it participates in the forms. Okay? No. The Christian God does not find matter just on hand and then starts a shaping it. No. The Christian God makes everything, including matter. From what? From nothing. Okay? So this isn't all powerful. This is all powerful being in that sense, right? All powerful in a sense that implies the power to create from nothing. And so, right, power to create not just form in matter, but the matter itself. Okay. I think this will lead to another difference between Plotinus and Augustine. This difference has to do with like whether matter is bad. Now, I said in the lecture on Plotinus that matter isn't evil for him. What's evil is like overrating matter, and also, right, thinking, acting as if one were an entirely separate and independent being, right, vis-a-vis other embodied souls. Okay, that I said for Plotinus, like that's what evil is, right? I haven't thought about this more. I think I need to like modify that claim like just a bit. Okay, if we're talking about like what some people call ethical evil, like evil that can be for which blame can be assigned, right? For which you can hold like some agent responsible. Okay, what I just said about Plotinus is accurate. Overrating material stuff, thinking and acting as though when we're separate and wholly separate and independent, right? Yeah, that's what for him is ethical evil. Okay. But perhaps, right? Perhaps Plotinus allows for an evil for which blame can't really be like assigned. Right? This would be like what some people call like metaphysical evil. Right? Maybe Plotinus thinks that there is such evil. Like how so? Well, it could be the case that Plotinus, actually like following the letter of the text in the Timaeus, that creation myth, it could be that Plotinus thinks that the one in its generative activity, right, gives rise to thought and form, and thought and form in their generative activity give rise to soul and body. But at no point in this generative process is the one or anything that stems from it, strictly speaking, giving rise to matter. Right? It could be the case, in other words, that when Plotinus and his followers, right, talk about like body being generated, what they're actually talking about is matter that's already there on hand that the one does not generate, okay, and that thought does not generate. Matter that is already there and on hand, coming to have form, coming to possess form, to some extent. Okay. Of course, though, like matter that's formed, however well it's formed, is never like a perfect image of the form of or forms of which it is an image. It's always at best like formed matter, like stuff that's body. It's always at best an approximation of the form or forms that it exemplifies, that it is an image of. Okay. To the extent that it is different from the forms that it exemplifies, right, it could be said to be like unformed. Yeah. Okay, well, form is an emanation of the one, and the one, according to Plotinus, is the divinity. It's good. By extension, form then should be good. Body, insofar as it is matter of some form, should also be good, although like to a lesser degree, right? But again, like any body is going to be formed to some extent, but also lacking in form to some extent. Okay. Insofar as it lacks form, it lacks that which makes a body good. Okay. Insofar as it lacks form, then it would seem to be not good. Well, not good. That's like, it seems like that's another way of saying bad, right? So it could be the case that Plotinus actually thinks there's two kinds of evil. There's ethical evil, and that's the evil for which you can hold some agent or agents responsible. And then there's metaphysical evil, which is like it's the presence, it's the existence of that which is like other than good. Okay. And so we could also say that like according to Plotinus, like as with Aristotle, like there is no matter as such, right? Like matter as such is what you can think when you abstract away from whatever form matter has. But as a matter of fact, all the matter that there is formed, like in many respects, right? So there is no matter as such, right? When we think matter as such, though, we're thinking something free of form. Foremost, what imparts like goodness to matter. So we're thinking matter like apart from being good. Okay. That which is not good would seem to be bad. Right? So there could then be both like according to Plotinus, like ethical evil and metaphysical evil too. Okay. This is not a view that Augustine can have, because Augustine's view, given what he thinks about God, given that God he thinks is all powerful, he has to think that God creates matter too. God doesn't just inform matter that's already on hand. God creates the matter too. Okay. Well, in that case, right, matter can't be other than good, right? It has to be good too, as with everything, right, that God creates. So the only evil for Augustine is going to have to be like ethical evil. It's evil for which we can establish responsibility, right? We can blame it on someone. Right? So that's another difference. Okay, then let me now get into book one of On Free Choice of the Will. I mean, throughout his life, Augustine did remain attracted at least intellectually, to Manichaeism, because throughout his life he recognized that it offered an elegant solution to the problem of evil. Once he converted to Christianity, he could no longer, of course, be a Manichaean, right? Because as a Christian, he believed in just one God who's good and who made this world, indeed made it from nothing. Okay, and so what he needed then, as a Christian, was a different solution to the problem of evil. One that, as we will see, is actually like not so elegant as the Manichaean solution. So, Book 1, it's, I believe, set in Rome, where Augustine was supposed to have been studying Christianity at this point with a fellow student named Evodius. So, what we have here is another dialogue, this time between two people, both, I gather, like students at this point in a way, Augustine and Evodius. And it's very clear what the dialogue is about from the very first sentence, I think. Evodius asks a question of Augustine, and the question is, Augustine, is God the cause of evil? Right, so like right away you know what the dialogue is about. It's about the problem of evil. And it's going to offer like a solution to the problem or problems that's consistent with basic tenets of Christianity. So Augustine responds to this question by saying, well, like what do you mean? What are we talking about here? And in the discussion of that question that follows, Augustine points out to Evodius that when people talk about evil, they're really talking about like two different kinds of happening, right? Sometimes they're talking about like what we could call evil suffered, and this has to do with like being the victim of a crime, like an assault. It also has to do with suffering from sickness, disease. It has to do with like natural disasters, volcanic eruptions, floods, earthquakes, and the like. Crop failures too, leading to famine. This is all evil suffered. Okay. Sometimes though, when people talk about evil, they're talking about like evil doing, and so this would be, instead of like being like the victim of a crime, like suffering assault, this would actually be like engaging in assault, like committing like an immoral offense against another human being. So Augustine then says, look, as a Christian, like you should understand that evil suffered is not actually evil. It's actually a good thing. A good thing that God, of course, is responsible for. So his view initially is that that which people call evil, that's evil suffered, like natural disasters and so forth, right? That is in fact not really evil. It's a good thing. It's God's just retribution, payback, just payback, punishment for human evil doing, Okay, so what he's done right away is he's eliminated much of what people call evil as a problem, right? Like he has right away squared all of that with the God of Christianity, because it's not really evil, it's just punishment for human evil doing. Okay. So he's limited his problem then to how human evil doing is compatible with the existence of the God of Christianity, right? So to deal with that problem, he next in the dialogue has his characters discuss what evil doing is, right? Once Evodius, the other character, is clear on this distinction between evil suffered and evil doing, and it's clear that evil suffered is actually a good thing, right? He asks, well then, why do people do evil, right? In other words, like, is God the cause of that? Because if God is the cause of that, right, then we have problems. That would be tantamount to saying that God is an evildoer, at least indirectly. Okay. So Augustine says, look, before we are able to figure out why humans do evil, we first need to figure out, like, what evil doing is. And so he asks Evodius, well, what do you think evil doing is? And Evodius's initial answer is it's something that sounds a lot like what I believe is very often called the golden rule. What Evodius says is, I think that evil doing is a matter of doing to other people what you don't want them to do to you. I think that's what evil doing is. And Augustine says, surprisingly, actually, that's wrong. No, that's not evil doing. And his example is actually like this. It's a really strange one. It has to do with I guess what you could call like wife swapping. His example has to do with a man who wants to commit adultery with another man's wife in exchange for letting the other man do the same with his own wife. Okay, here's a case where the rule for wrongdoing that Evodius has expressed hasn't been violated. And again, that rule is don't do to other people what you don't want them to do to you, right? Well, in this case, right, this fellow is if he gets his way, right, he's doing to the other person exactly what he wants the other person to do to them. Is this then not wrong? Augustine asks Evodius, and Evodius says, "Oh no, that's still clearly wrong, right?" So this is rejected as an account then of what it is to do wrong. And again, the account was wrongdoing is a matter of doing to other people what you don't want them to do to you. This is rejected. Evodius then comes up with an alternative answer. He says, "Oh, maybe wrongdoing is a matter of like acting out of desire for things that we can lose against our will." Okay, and like that view actually expresses some familiarity with Stoic doctrines. Okay, I mean, the Stoics believed that in order to do well in life, you should act as though you think the only thing that's really good for you is virtue, right? And virtue amounts to, virtue among other things involves, right, forming good judgments and making good choices. And the Stoic view is also that all of that's entirely within your power, right? That's entirely within your power. These are good things that you cannot lose against your will. The Stoic view was that like, people go wrong when they so highly rate other things. When they think what's like really good for them, right, includes stuff that isn't entirely within their power, stuff that they can lose like against their will. Okay, that's when people go wrong. That's when they do bad. Okay, so perhaps Evodius is here giving expression to a view that is similar, at least, to the views that Stoics would have had about doing wrong. And Augustine responds better to this suggestion. Right? He thinks there's something right about it, but he raises a problem for this view, and the problem is the case of the person who kills another person in self-defense. Right? And he points out to Evodius that on Evodius' account of wrongdoing, this would seem to be wrong, because after all, the person who kills in self-defense kills in order to preserve their own life. But if they kill in order to preserve their own life, they're clearly acting out of desire, right? To keep that which they can lose against their will. Okay, so again, the suggestion that Evodius made was that wrongdoing is acting out of desire for things that we can lose against our will. Augustine's objection is the person who kills in self-defense seems to act out of a desire, right, for something that they can lose against their will, and that is their life, right? So according to Evodius' account of wrongdoing, killing in self-defense should be wrong. But Augustine points out, no one thinks it's wrong. Of all the laws that we know of governing all the people that we know of in the world, right, no laws punish the person who genuinely, right, kills as an act of self-defense. Okay. So Evodius says, well, look, that's true. No laws are like that. But maybe that's not because this isn't wrong. Maybe it is wrong. Okay, but people making laws, they sort of have to choose between two evils, right? The evil of someone killing in self-defense, right, and the evil of someone else killing that person, right? So killing not in self-defense, and the evil of killing in self-defense is the lesser evil, right? And so that's why by law they allow this. Okay, given the choice between two evils, they set up the law, right, so that the lesser is preferred. It's left open as an option. But, right, killing in self-defense, it's still wrongdoing. It's still evil. And if it isn't punished by human law, for the reasons that Evodius just gave, maybe it's punished by divine law. Maybe God punishes it. Okay. So Augustine says, well, I don't agree with you. I think this is wrong, but I do like this distinction you're making between like human law and divine law. And so what I want to do now is I want to make a similar distinction with a view towards clarifying what wrongdoing is. And in clarifying it, what I'm going to do is improve on the account that you're giving now, which is on the right track, but is still flawed. So what Augustine asks Evodius to do is imagine a city. It's a city of citizens who are people of civic virtue. Okay, so these are people who are prudent. They have wisdom when it comes to managing like practical affairs. Right? They are moderate people. Right, so they don't either they don't desire too much, right, like more than they need, or if they do have desires for too much, that they're able to exercise control over their desires. Right? These are people too who are just, right, exercising control over their desires. They're not grasping when it comes to the good things that others have. They're not like strongly motivated to take more, right, than their share of good things, and they're willing to bear the burden of their share of the bad things, right, that citizens have to suffer or endure together. Okay, imagine a community where the citizens are like that. Augustine says. Now, what kind of laws should these people have? Specifically, like what kind of government should the laws of these people make for? Like, by law, who should rule these people? Again, they've got the civic virtues, right? They're just, they're moderate, they have a certain kind of wisdom, at least concerning like practical affairs. They're probably brave too. Well, Evodius says, they should rule themselves. In other words, right, this should be something like a republic, right, in Plato's sense, right, in the old Greek sense, and in the old Roman sense too, like a citizen-run community. These people should manage their own affairs, right? That's what the laws of these people should make for. Okay, good. Right, Augustine says. But suppose that these people over time, they become corrupt. So, they continue to be people who, as a matter of fact, have desires for more than they need. But over time, they become like less and less moderate. Like over time, they're less and less able to control those desires. Those desires get the better of them, right? And so they start acting on them, and this leads them in turn to become unjust, right? Because they become very grasping. They take more than their share of good things. They're in the habit of doing this, right? And they're unwilling to bear like their fair share of bad things. They gradually too become very imprudent, and maybe even cowardly too, right? Now, should the laws of these people be the same? Should the laws make for, in particular, the same kind of government? Should these people manage their own affairs? And Evodius answers, no, they should not. Rather than the laws making for self-government, the laws should instead make for, if someone with the ability is available, monarchy. Sole rule by a wise, benevolent person. Okay? These people are no longer fit to manage their own affairs. They are now in a condition where it is appropriate for them to be managed by someone else. Okay. All right. So Augustine then says, look, these two sets of laws, the laws making for a republic and the laws making for a monarchy, these are laws that change over time, right? As the beings to which they apply change in time. These laws that change over time, holding for beings that change over time, call those temporal laws. These are temporal laws, okay? Temporal because changing in time. Right? It's rather like what Evodius was talking about with human law. Right? Okay. How are you able, Evodius, Augustine asks, how are you able to know that the temporal law should change in this way? How do you know that these people ought to have one set of temporal laws at one time and a different set of temporal laws at another time? How do you know that their laws governing them at one time ought to make for a republic and the laws governing them at another time ought to make for monarchy? Don't you have to look to like some other principle, right? Some other rule in order to figure out what rules should hold for these people, first at one time and then at another time, right? And isn't that rule something like the following, the rule that you're looking to figure out what the temporal law should be? Everything should be in due order, right? Or in other words, like people should have what's appropriate to them. People should get what's fitting for them. The first group of people, what's fitting for them? Republic, right? And so they should get laws making for a republic. The second group of people, what's fitting for them? Monarchy. And so they should get the temporal laws, right, making for monarchy. So there's another rule that we look to when figuring out what the temporal law should be. And that other rule, right, let's say it's everything should be in due order, right? That rule, unlike these temporal laws, that rule is not something that changes, right? It's always the same, uh, it applies in different ways over time, and that's what gives us different temporal laws. But this law, it's eternal. It doesn't change. Temporal laws come and go. This one doesn't come into existence or go out of existence. Also, temporal laws are many, right? As just illustrated, right? There are many sets of temporal laws. Some making for republics, some making for monarchies. But the eternal law, on which these temporal laws depend, it's one. It's one. Okay, and the law is again like roughly like everything should be in due order. Everything should be in due order. Okay, now, right, how does this law apply to human beings? Is it possible for an individual human being to likewise be in good order or like out of order? Right? Evodius thinks it is possible for a human being to be in order, and the order has to do with parts of the psyche or parts of the soul. Okay, I believe in Augustine's Latin it's animus. According to both Augustine and Evodius, there are at least two different parts of the human psyche. Okay, Evodius has already mentioned desire, so desire is one part, right? And it seems on Evodius's account, with which Augustine is going to agree, that it's the part that like gets us into trouble. It's not the only part that gets us into trouble, but it's at least a part that gets us into trouble, right? But we are not just beings of desire. Of course, this is now a familiar notion in Greco-Roman thought. We're rational beings too. Okay, so we're beings who can like understand evidence, on the basis of evidence, see what the truth is, and like see too like what should be done, what we should do, like accordingly. Okay, so the soul has at least two parts: reason and desire. Reason and desire. Okay, the soul is in due order. Evodius and Augustine agree when reason rules, right? When the buck stops with reason, when desires are acted on only within the bounds of reason. Okay, yes. A soul is then going to be disordered. It will, in a sense, be in violation of the eternal law that everything be in due order when the agent acts on desires that are irrational, that are contrary to reason. Okay, and in some translations of On Free Choice of the Will, such desire is called inordinate desire, which just means like disordered desire. How, though, Augustine asks, is it possible for a soul to become disordered? I mean, after all, like reason is the part of the psyche that should rule. Desire should be subordinate to it. These are the jobs, if you will, that reason and desire like naturally have. Okay, I mean the human psyche, in his view, is built so that reason rules and desire is subordinate to it. Like how then could disorder ever get introduced? It seems to be contrary to nature. Okay, and anything that's contrary to nature like seems to be like a corruption, and corruption is like a weakening. Okay, so if you think about this, it doesn't seem as though this disorder in the psyche could be caused by like outside influences, like bad influences, right? Like other bad people, for instance. Okay, because after all, like those outside influences, if they're bad, if they're bad influences, they're influences of things that are corrupt. They're influences of things that are weak. Something that's weak does not make something that's strong weaker. This is anyway like Augustine's reasoning in the text. Okay. So if the soul becomes disordered, and thus becomes in a way like corrupt and weak, the source of the disorder must not be something external, but something internal. And so we've missed something. Like there's another part of the soul that we need to take account of, and that part is called, in English translation, it's called will. Okay, and Augustine initially presents this part as just like the power of choosing. That's it. Insofar as you can choose, right? Insofar as you can make a decision, insofar as you can resolve to do something, you have this power of willing. Okay. He then goes on to argue that the will is a self-determining power, right? And what this means is that it's entirely within your power to will as you do, right? You are unhindered, you're unconstrained in the exercise of your power to will, right? Augustine believes, right, this implies that nothing then makes us will as we do. Okay, the will is again like an entirely like self-determining power. Right? So I suppose he would also want to say, you will as you do simply by willing it. Right. What this means then is this. According to Augustine, the source of disorder in the soul is not something external to the soul or psyche. The source of disorder is within the psyche. It's will. It's will. Agents act on desire contrary to reason, right? Insofar as they will to do so, right? That's what makes agents do that. Okay, and that then is wrongdoing according to Augustine. Right? It is not just desiring things that we can lose against our will. Instead, it's desiring things that we can lose against our will, contrary to reason. Acting on those desires voluntarily. Let me like say this again more clearly. Wrongdoing for Augustine, right? That's a matter of willingly acting on desires for things that we can lose against our will, contrary to reason. And I can put that even more simply by saying that wrongdoing for Augustine is a matter of like willingly, by choice, acting on inordinate desire, right? Desire that exceeds the bounds imposed on desire by reason. Okay. All right. This implies that the ultimate source of all the evil that there is in the world, and the evil that there is in the world is only ethical evil. The ultimate source of all the evil that there is in the world, right, is like human will that is unhindered, unconstrained,